Okay, so today we're doing something pretty cool. We're out in my Land Rover trying to get stuck. Is that what the plan is?
Yeah, not usually the goal, but we are right now trying intentionally to get this stuck so we can demonstrate something pretty important for recoveries.
Yeah, we're talking about proper recovery technique, what the big YouTubers show you, what they don't, and a little bit of everything in between. So we are here in Tumbleweed Ranch. The suspension is going into the emergency off-road height. And let's see if we are
Indeed stuck.
thoroughly stuck here.
Well, it really didn't take much, did it? You're not exactly on mud terrains, Tommy.
A little bit of kind of deep, thick mud, and I think that's all it took.
Well, mission accomplished.
Yeah.
Within the first 30 seconds of the video, we're stuck.
So what we're gonna do now is meet our off-road recovery expert. He does this for a living, and talk about some proper ways to get unstuck. All right, so we have a really special guest today, Eric Ross. He's been doing this for years. He has been on countless recoveries across the decades, Eric.
Yeah.
And
decades here and there. Yeah.
Eric, you actually run a company
Yeah.
that specializes in exactly this, in training. Talk to me about what you do.
Yeah, so my company's called Sierra Mechanica. So for about 15 years, I've been doing sort of informal driving, guiding, training for recovery and stuff like that. Last 2 years, I decided to formalize it and sort of open it up to the public. So yeah, I've been driving off-road for, God, 30 plus years now. I've been doing the backcountry in Colorado for my whole life. And that turned into a passion for these rigs right here. I'm a little bit of a Toyota guy. No disrespect. If I could own 2 rigs, I'd probably have a little Jeep TJ also.
Okay.
But yeah, that turned into, hey, I want to make sure that people are using best practices, being safe, learning how to use the right tools, and all that good stuff.
Well, we're really honored to have Eric here because I'll be the first to admit, we have a fair bit of off-road experience, but no formal training, especially with recoveries, which are, well, they can be very dangerous, as you have firsthand experience with. So we're going to talk about some proper ways to get unstuck. We're going to get into a couple of unfortunate situations with my Land Rover, and then Eric's going to show us the best ways to recover someone, your buddy.
Excellent. Where do you want to start?
So let's kind of evaluate the situation, maybe, Eric.
Excellent.
That I've gotten myself into. So how common is it for someone to nose down into a stupid obstacle like I did and then just get completely caked in mud?
I won't go with common, but yeah, people all the time go just a little bit too far, maybe a little bit too beyond their capabilities, a little bit too far beyond their vehicle's capabilities.
Yep.
They haven't scouted the trail. Maybe they make the incorrect assumption that, hey, the last time I was here, it was fine, no big deal. And they drive in and, well, just like you've been here before and you've driven through this, and today it didn't go so well.
So walk me through some of like the don'ts that you're not supposed to do if you're in this situation. So like the first thing that I do, and that I think a lot of folks do, is immediately go for the gas pedal.
Yeah.
But that sounds like it can make things worse pretty quickly.
Yeah, we don't like spinning tires. Spinning tires turns into perhaps you're spinning one a little bit faster than the rest, and then you suddenly get traction, and that turns into breaking a CV, breaking an axle, breaking a differential. So maintaining control, we want traction all the time, rolling traction. And maybe that's using your brake a little bit of brake throttle modulation. Maybe that's using some of the buttons you have on your dash. If you've got like A-track or off-road traction control, some of the crawl modes, those are all good. Maybe it's you plan ahead a little bit and you turn on a locker so that you're maintaining traction, on both sides of the vehicle. So lots of different strategies, but mostly it's about scouting ahead, making sure you know what you're getting into, and thinking a couple of steps ahead so that you have a plan and a strategy to get through the obstacle.
Okay. Now it sounds like when you do a lot of these off-road recoveries here in Colorado, you're telling me some stories. One of the things that can help is just you get to someone that's stuck, you let a lot of pressure out of the tires, and in some cases it sounds like they can drive themselves out. Is that true?
Yeah, so airing down is a fantastic traction aid. We're driving around on highways, and the idea with high tire pressure is that you are reducing rolling resistance, right? You get good gas mileage, you're driving down the highway, that's great. When you get on a trail, you want to air down a little bit. It's good for you, so a little bit of suspension for your body. It's good for your vehicle so that you're not rattling all of the suspension parts and everything inside it, including you and your dogs and your drinks, whatever that might be. And you're allowing that tire to conform to the terrain so you get better traction overall.
Yeah, very cool. Now, if you're in a situation like I am where that's not going to help and you're lucky enough to have Eric with you to help you pull yourself out, there's a bunch of different ways to actually recover a stuck vehicle. So we've got winches, we've got various different types of straps. So walk me through, in what situation would you want what kind of device?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on the type of terrain you're in, the type of vehicle you're driving. Usually what I'm looking for is what can I actually use on your vehicle to recover you?
Okay, interesting.
So I'm looking for recovery points. You've got one on the rear here. I want to evaluate whether that's a good sturdy recovery point. It's mounted to the frame. I want to look and see if we have any options on the front. You know, do you have sliders? You know, do you have skid plates? And when I'm evaluating a recovery, I'm also looking at, well, what are you hung up on? How did you get here? What is the actual stuck scenario? So do a stuck assessment and looking under your vehicle to make sure, okay, do we just have a, you know, are we high centered? Do we need to clear that? Are you just in deep mud and your wheels are spinning and it's just a traction issue? Well, maybe that's just some traction boards. Let's grab those and throw them under there. Maybe we need to lift a tire to put a traction board under to get a little bit of traction. Maybe we have room to use a K-rope, right? Here's not really a great scenario for that. But we could use a kinetic rope to, you know, just bounce you out of where you're at, right? Or we might use a winch to do a nice controlled recovery. So lots of options. So depends on the scenario.
Look, there's some really fantastic channels out there that do a lot of recoveries, and there's a lot of emphasis now on these kinetic ropes. I actually have one here. I'll pull it out, and maybe we can talk about how it works and some of the pros and maybe some of the cons of these bad boys. So, Eric, kind of explain what a kinetic rope does and why it might not be the best tool in certain situations.
So kinetic ropes are for two types of recoveries. One is what we call a traction extraction, which means that we will hook up to your vehicle and we'll put just a little bit of tension on it and we'll literally just try to drive you out, just like it might be like a tow rope, right?
Yep.
Or a tow strap. The thing that we like about kinetic ropes is they stretch a little bit. They can stretch up to about 30% of their length.
Okay.
So we're reducing whatever sort of dynamic or shock load we might put in the system. So we minimize the opportunity to break something, right? Whether it's the anchor that we're connecting to or the recovery point that we're connected to. So with that traction extraction, we're just going to roll out and we're going to see if I have enough traction in my vehicle with this rope attached to yours to just pull you out nice and easy.
Okay.
We might ramp it up and we go to sort of a dynamic and we'll do a momentum extraction. Now the problem with the momentum extraction that most people they don't think about is that they think the faster the better, and that's not the case. We want it to be very controlled.
Okay.
My philosophy is that we want to apply the least force necessary. Okay, so that's why we start with a nice easy traction extraction, and then we'll connect and we'll back up maybe a quarter of the length of this rope, and we're only going to go about 2, maybe 3 miles an hour with my vehicle to provide that momentum and the weight of my vehicle and the stretch of this rope to pull you out.
Okay.
Okay?
Interesting.
If that doesn't work, we'll go ahead and ramp it up just a little bit more. We'll go back to about half the length of this rope, and we'll go up to maybe 5 or 6 miles per hour, and we'll try the same thing. If that doesn't work, we need to reevaluate what we're trying to do.
Okay.
Maybe it's reducing the mire factor, maybe it's switching to a winch, all of that kind of stuff. The reason we don't want to go more than 5 or 6 miles per hour is these can only stretch so fast.
Okay.
It's called a rate of elongation. So think about a rubber band. If you take a rubber band in your fingers and you stretch it nice and slow, it stretches. If you yank on it really hard, it breaks. Okay. Same with these, they can only stretch so fast and so far. So we want to keep it within that range.
Gotcha. So you really you wouldn't want to hook one of these up to that thing and go full throttle, 25 miles an hour.
No.
Yeah.
You hear people say send it all the time, and that is not what we do.
Okay. Very interesting. So in this situation, granted we have a fairly large number of bushes and kind of trees around us, would you try a kinetic rope first, or would you go straight to a winch? What do you think?
So we could. I mean, the thing that we're looking for is that in order for me to help you, I need to have traction.
Okay.
Right? So we've got what looks like maybe a 30-foot rope here.
Yep.
Right? With the knot in it.
Yeah, classic.
So get that out. Okay, so if I were to stretch this out to about 30 feet, I'm still on an uphill incline on a grassy slope. Not great traction. Right? Especially if we're going to just try to pull you nice and easy, or even if we try to do that little bump.
Yeah.
Not a great traction environment, and we don't have a run out. We're going around a corner. Okay?
Right.
So if this is the tool you have, sure, you could give it a shot. But in this particular case, it seems like it might be a little bit more controlled to just come down here and hook up a winch and pull you out nice and easy and slow.
Cool. So when you're doing your, what did you call it, your stuck analysis?
Stuck assessment.
Yeah, can we do one on this Land Rover and kind of walk me through what you're looking for?
Here, I'll police up your rope here.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll just stick it.
Sorry, kinetic rope, not today. Maybe some other time.
All right, so what are you looking for in these assessments?
So I'm doing a 360 degree.
Okay.
And usually it starts with me asking you questions.
Okay.
So how did you get here?
I drove in slowly and then tried to back up and and it wasn't happening.
Okay, is your vehicle in four-wheel drive?
It is, yes.
Is it in low floor?
It is, believe it or not, yeah.
Okay, do you have any traction aids like lockers or anything like that?
I do have off-road modes, and I am in the most aggressive locked mode.
Okay.
So that's going to have the most torque distribution.
And what happened when you tried to use that?
The ABS pump is pumping and 4 wheels are spinning. The center diff is locked and nothing's happening. And then I think on the front, I am completely jammed into the front.
Yeah, I think when I was watching, basically all 4 of your wheels were spinning a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's an indication that, you know, if you can't go forward, you might be nosed into something. So let's go look at that.
Yeah, let's check that out. Here, Gavin, I can take that camera for a sec and I'll just film Eric so you don't have to get down here again. All right.
Yeah, looks like you found some mud and wood and grass. So you're not going forward. Right?
Okay.
So if you're trying to go forward, obviously you'd want to, and I believe you tried to back up.
Yep.
And so you lost traction that way. So that's an indication to me that maybe it's not just the front end that's stuck.
Okay.
If you're trying to go backwards, maybe it's just the weight of your vehicle and the angle of the slope. Those are things that can prevent it also. But it might be that you're hung up. And that's where I'm going to start looking under the vehicle to see, oh, are you on the frame? Are you on a slider? Are you on an axle? Things like that.
Cool.
So let's have a look-see over here. So it looks like you're clear in the back, which is good. But it looks like you have basically high centered the front.
Okay.
So do you have a skid plate up under there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've probably buried that in some nice muck, right?
Yep.
So you've got the weight of the vehicle down slope into a little bit of a mud berm over there, and you've got your front, not axle per se, but you've got your front differential on that skid plate with the entire weight of the vehicle on it.
So it's not that the vehicle is simply can't get traction, it's that we're actually resting on a major component.
Likely.
Yeah.
That and the fact that, you know, you do have your tires mired pretty deep. So these guys right here are fighting a lot of, fighting mud, water, whatever else might be in there. You've got some logs, that good stuff. And back here, you're on grass. Grass is really slick, right? So all of these things are working against you. Weight, mire factor, you're resting on something, your tires don't have good traction, you're probably not aired down. So all of those things are compounding factors.
Okay, interesting.
So all of that leads me to believe that, well, a nice controlled recovery with the winch, especially when you're in mud like this, what tends to happen is the vehicle settles into the mud. It actually creates suction, and it literally sucks your vehicle in. So in order to break that, we want to do a nice smooth pull to gradually ramp up the force to eventually break that suction and break the vehicle free of that.
Cool.
So another reason why Kinetic might not be great for this, because breaking suction nice and slow is more controlled and less dynamic and less likely to grab on or break something than if we're using a winch to do a nice smooth pull.
Very cool.
Also, because you've landed on something down here, I don't know if you've got stuff that is stuck up underneath your vehicle. I see all these logs and these trees around here. It could be that there's some branches and stuff up there, and I don't want to yank your vehicle out of there and have one of those branches go up into your undercarriage, rip off a suspension component. I've seen branches go through floorboards. So
wow, really?
we want to avoid that.
Wow, yeah, that's bad news.
Yep. So it looks like you've got, I was looking at the recovery points earlier, you've got a good one on the front, but we're not going that way. You've got a good one on the rear, so we'll probably use that.
Cool.
And we'll come up with a recovery plan and get some gear out. All right, so we kind of have some basics. We know that you're mired in here.
Where does that word come from? Can you explain that?
Mired? I mean, you're basically buried in something.
Okay.
So you're literally in a mire.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But you can be mired in mud, you can be mired in sand, you can be mired in snow, you can be mired in dirt. Combinations thereof.
Gotcha.
And usually the tricky calculations are with snow and with sand because they're very variable. And same with mud. There's really sticky mud and there's really thin mud. So I always err on the side of you're more stuck than we think you might be.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
So that's a good segue. So we kind of know what's going on here. We've decided we're going to use the winch to pull you out. But we need to know how much energy we need to use to pull your vehicle out, how much force to apply. So I'd start with how much your vehicle weighs, and we start with a gross vehicle weight rating.
Yep.
That's the weight of your vehicle plus everything that you could and should put on it.
Yep.
I always err on the side of rounding up with those because those four-wheel drive and overlander folks like us, we like to do what?
Put stuff on them.
Yeah, we put on steel bumpers, sliders, roof racks, rooftop tents, skid plates, and all of that increases the weight pretty significantly.
7,011.
7,011, awesome. We can stick with 7,000. You know, looking at your vehicle, you haven't put a whole bunch of stuff on it. You popped open the back. You don't have, you know, a bunch of gear like I do. You know, I'm carrying around 500 pounds of stuff, so I want to account for that, right?
Yeah.
So we're going to start with 7,000 pounds. Okay, great. We're at an angle, right? So we're fighting the angle. Okay, so that's going to be part of the calculation. You're also mired in mud. The front end, maybe not the back end, so we'll have to kind of fudge the numbers a little bit. And we're, you know, trying to decide, you know, how much we're mired.
Okay.
So I'm going to give you this little guy right here. This is my little reference card.
Oh, wow.
So come take a class and you get this cool thing.
Yeah.
So at the top is where you'd write in your gross vehicle weight rating, and then you would use these calculations to get an estimate of how much weight you're going to move.
Okay.
So let's kind of do this off the top of our heads here. So your vehicle weighs 7,000 pounds.
Yep.
What kind of angle are we looking at right here?
Probably what, 20 degrees?
20 degrees? Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
good with that.
If we were to do some math, you can see what I've got on there for 20 degrees.
Yeah, so we're looking at GVWR, which is 7,000 times 0.4.
Okay.
So we're, what just over 3,000 on that?
We can call it 3,000.
Okay.
Start with 3,000, that's good. So
Yep.
we'd write that in there.
Okay.
Then we've got our surface. So what kind of surface are we on? This is where it gets a little bit tricky.
Well, so there's a bunch of different surface modifiers. You got hard pack, dirt, pavement, grass, gravel, sand, thin mud, dry sand, thick mud, soft, wet sand, or sticky mud.
Yeah. So
What do you think the situation is?
I'm gonna go with sticky mud just because you're kind of buried in there, right? We were looking at it, I walked in it, felt pretty sticky to me.
Okay.
And like I said, I always like to assume that we're gonna be in a worse scenario than we think we are.
Right.
So go ahead and go with sticky mud.
So we're at GVWR times 0.5, so it's 3,500 pounds.
Okay.
Okay.
So we got 33,000, we got 3,500.
Yep.
What's the next one on there?
We got the mic depth modifier?
The mire depth.
The mire depth modifier.
Yeah, so we're talking about that. Let's kind of come over here and I can kind of show you next to a wheel here what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So when we talk about mire depths, when we talk about wheel, we're looking at the bottom of the rim and how much of the, you know, when we're talking wheel depth, it's usually the top of the tire where it meets the rim.
Okay.
Okay, that would be that mire depth. Coming up to hub and axle, okay, would be right here. And then when we get really crazy, we've got somebody who had way too much fun and they got up into the body or top of the tire.
Okay.
That's going to be significant. So real quick, looking at that, you've been multiplying things by 0.1, 0.2, 0.4. When we talk about mire depth, what do those numbers turn into?
I mean, the modifiers, I don't know if you can see that, but they're like in the 2-3 range in some cases.
This is why one of the first things I do when I get out of the vehicle on a recovery is A, I put my gloves on, and B, I grab a shovel.
Okay.
Because the number one thing you can do to reduce the load you're trying to pull is to reduce that mire factor.
Gotcha.
Okay. Mud's a little bit tricky, especially with water. You can't really dig that out. But if you can, you should. So back here, we don't really have any mire factor.
Great.
Okay. Up front, we're up on the hub.
Okay.
Okay. Now, only half the vehicle's there, not the whole vehicle's there, so we might fudge the number a little bit. But let's go ahead and start with, if your whole vehicle is up to the hub, what is that number?
I mean, that's a multiplier of 2. So we're looking at 7,000 times 2 is 14,000 pounds.
Right.
Crazy.
So plus 3,
Yep.
plus 3.5.
Wow, I mean, we're at over 20,000 pounds.
Yep, and what's the next thing I have on there?
Estimated resistance, angle plus surface plus mire.
Okay, so you add all that together, that's what we just did.
And then 20% safety margin times 0.2. So that's 22,000 pounds.
Yeah, so we can fudge that a little bit because we know that your whole vehicle isn't sunk, right?
Right.
So we can reduce that mire factor a little bit. I would go ahead and cut that in half.
Okay.
But you can see why math is important, right? Because if you were mired like that, moving 22,000 pounds, well, how much does my vehicle weigh?
Oh, it's probably what, 6?
It's like 7 with all my stuff on it.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to happen when I start pulling you?
Well, you're going to start pulling
I'm
yourself
just going to drag myself down the hill, right?
Yeah, right.
Similarly, my winch is rated at 10,000 pounds. That's not going to do it. So now we're into mechanical advantage, needing to use pulley blocks and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Okay.
Now, here's an interesting question. If you did use a pulley block and you were able to multiply that capacity of the winch by a factor, does that change? That doesn't change the weight of your vehicle.
No, and a little bit of a misnomer there. The common frame has been that when you use a pulley block, you're doubling the power of the winch. That's not what you're doing.
Okay.
You're reducing the load on the winch by half.
Okay.
Okay, and we can talk about that. We can kind of talk through it once we hook it up. But you're trying to reduce the load on the winch, not increase the power of the winch.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're right. So if we did if we had to move that 22,000 pounds and we used a pulley block, we're still at 11.
Right.
So we're not doing that.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Similarly, we're just going to move my vehicle. So what could we do about that? But let's go back. Let's redo the math because we know that we don't have all 4 wheels sunk.
Okay.
So if we were to go back and just talk about half of that Meyer factor, that would be about 7,000 pounds. Right?
Sure,
So
right.
7 plus 3 plus 3.5, we're at 13.5 plus that 20%. So we're at about 15,000 pounds, which is still a pretty good pull.
Right.
Okay. So still probably not going to do a single line because my winch is only rated at 10. And we're going to have to figure out how we're going to secure my vehicle so I don't just drag myself down the hill.
All right.
Okay.
Wow, so this is a good example of why an easy recovery turns into a difficult recovery really quickly, and why if you try to go the easy way, you may end up in a worse situation than you would have been otherwise.
Yeah, what I see all the time is, you know, everybody thinks this is an emergency, and they all want to act right now, and they want to hook something up and start moving things. And the first thing you should do is slow down, think about what's going on, do a little safety assessment, make sure everybody's vehicle's in a good place, do a stock assessment, come up with a plan, do the math so you know the right tool to use. Because similarly, if we were trying to move 22,000 pounds, do I want to try to do that with a K-rope?
Right.
Probably not. That's pretty huge dynamic load to try to move.
Right.
Okay. And come up with a recovery plan and decide whether or not you have the available tools, and not just, hey, let's just hook up winch to it and try to pull and see what happens. Think ahead a little bit, do the math, see what gear you have. The longer you spend on prepping and building a plan, the less time you're going to spend pulling the vehicle out. All right, there's prepared and there's over prepared. Don't use me as an example of what you need, but what you could have. Okay. Okay? This is a 35-year accumulation of stuff that I've used on the trail. Okay?
Wow.
So I do like to talk about securing your gear in the back of your truck.
Yep.
A lot of people just toss their stuff in the back. It's probably not going to happen, but the last thing you want to have happen is, even if you just slop your vehicle, you don't want 200 pounds of stuff smacking you in the back of the head. Okay, so find a way to strap your gear down. I use this cargo net, it's pretty good. If you're using straps, bungees not so much, but something's better than nothing.
Okay.
So strap your gear down. So some things that we know we need, right? We know we're going to use the winch. We know we're going to use a pulley block because we've done the math, and my winch ain't going to do it just on a straight line pull.
Yep.
We need to be able to anchor to your vehicle and back to mine.
Okay.
So let's grab some stuff out of here.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So 35 years worth of stuff, Eric. If someone was just getting into this hobby to begin with, what do you think a typical gear spend should be?
You know, people ask me this all the time, and they don't like my answer.
Okay.
And part of the reason they don't like my answer is because not all gear is created equal.
Okay.
And so, you know, the common phrasing for me and the other folks that I train with is that you want to cry once, buy once.
Okay.
Okay. You can go out and you can buy a cheap recovery kit that has all the stuff that you may or may not need, but it's not built by a reputable manufacturer, not somebody who load tests their gear. My standard is that I'm using stuff that has been tested in some fashion, that's rated, and in particular for some of the hard gear I use is rated for overhead lifting. So it's coming from the crane community.
Okay.
And this is a regulated industry, right? And so I know that the gear that I'm going to get has been tested to fail, and I know that the numbers on it actually mean something.
Gotcha.
So that's what I'm looking for. So as a result, it's a little more expensive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right on.
So the answer I usually give is that when you're thinking about a kit, what you kind of need to start with, I'll go ahead and throw out kind of what my recommendations are.
Yeah. Let's do
And we're not going to use all this stuff, but a good tree strap is essential. Even better yet, 2.
Okay.
That's maybe for another day, but
Okay. Yep.
it adds some versatility to what you can do in terms of redirecting a winch pull. You can use these to bridle for towing and things like that. So having a couple of those is really good.
Yep.
Soft shackles. At least 2 of these guys. You can see I've got a whole passel of these, but I've been collecting them over the years. But a couple of good soft shackles.
Now, quick note on these, Eric, for those people that maybe are not as familiar with this gear. This is kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is replace the D-ring, or is it in complement to the D-ring?
Oh, you make such a wonderful segue for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay. So soft shackles have actually been around for a long time. They came from the sailing community and the abseiling community. So people who are going up and climbing and doing tightrope rocking in weird places, and also for sailing. So these have been around for quite a while, but they haven't really been in the off-road community. I guess it's been about 15 years. Okay. Primarily came from the racing community, like a lot of our gear does, and got developed into what we're using today. Honestly, when I started doing this, I had a worn winch with the wire rope, and everything was hard shackles.
Okay.
Right. So that's where I came from.
Yeah.
And then I remember the first class I went to, and they're like, "Oh, here's these soft shackles." I was like, "Yeah, no, I don't trust that. Okay, but I do now, primarily through use over and over and over again. Now that said, not all soft shackles are created equal.
Okay.
You can get the Amazon special soft shackle for $12, and it will tell you that it's rated for 44,000 pounds, and it'll have a nifty sheath on it, and it'll look somewhat like this. Okay, but it won't have a tag on it that actually tells you the diameter of the rope, what it's actually rated for, what it's made out of, and maybe perhaps where it's manufactured.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now that's not to say that, you know, China isn't really good at duplicating this stuff. Okay. But once you see a good piece of gear and you hold it in your hands and you have a tag on this that tells you what it is, and you pick up an inferior piece, you'll know the difference.
Gotcha.
Okay. So make sure you're selecting that gear properly. I'm happy to make some recommendations for some folks that I trust.
Yeah.
But that segues into what this is. This is not a D-ring.
Okay.
Okay, this is a screw pin bow shackle.
Okay.
A D-ring actually looks like a D, and it's for securing chain on load. Okay, so I know that when you go to a four-wheel drive shop, they've got this up in a package that says D-ring on it. Right. But the correct nomenclature is a screw pin bow shackle.
There you go.
Okay, and it's a screw pin bow shackle because it has a pin that screws in and out, and it has a bow. Okay, these also are not all created equal. Okay, there are Chinesium versions of these also. Yeah. You want to get these from a reputable overhead lifting company like Crosby or Van Beest. They're going to cost you $35, $40 a piece. You know, these are going to cost you $45, $50 a piece. This is where money comes in, right? Right. But once again, this is actually designed for use in crane operations. It's got a working load limit, which means it can do that load all the time, and it's got a safety margin of 5 or 6 to 1, which means it's got a really high braking strength, somewhere between 40 and 50,000 pounds. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Now that said, one of the things we like about soft shackles is that if something does break, which one of these would I prefer have flying through the air? The soft shackle. Yeah. Okay. So when I can, I use these, but there are circumstances where this is more appropriate, in particular depending on what you're going to connect to. Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So it's nice to have a couple of each of these, primarily so that if you come up on a vehicle that doesn't have something that you can attach a soft shackle to, something with really hard edges on it or something, you can use this instead. Cool. Okay. Right on. All right. Other stuff that is kind of in the essential lane, a good pulley block, a receiver shackle, and I'm going to throw in one little foil here that maybe you don't need, but you'll find that you really want. This is called an X-lock. Okay. Okay. Right on. And sort of the last add-on is, oh, wrong bag. Has this been cleaned up? Oh, somebody else wrapped this for me. Here's a winch line extension. Now, here's a funny thing. I will recommend this same kit to people who don't have a winch. No way. Okay. Okay. Oh, and of course we forgot the magical Kinetic rope. And one thing we didn't talk about is how we rate those, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay. So even if you don't have a winch, all of these will be useful to you. Okay. Your vehicle can pull a line through a pulley block just like a winch. Okay. So I've seen circumstances where, okay, well, we can't use a Kinetic rope here because we don't have a nice straight line. But we have figured out that we can just use a nice traction extraction on something, and we can use a tree strap and a pulley block and a winch line extension attached to my vehicle, attached to your vehicle, and pull a vehicle back on a trail. Cool. Don't need a winch for that. Yeah, right. Okay. So even if you don't have a winch, these are good tools to have because you might be able to use them. Or better yet, I see people all the time who they buy their four-wheel drive, they go buy a winch, and they say, I'm good to go. Well, they don't have a way to attach to a tree, they don't have a way to attach to your vehicle, they don't have a way to apply mechanical advantage. So if you want to be the responsible person for yourself, if you have that gear and you come across somebody who has a winch and you don't, you can apply these tools to get yourself unstuck. Sweet. So this is kind of what I tell people to start with. Some of this is really, you know, snazzy gear that I've paid a little extra money for, but you're probably talking $400 or $500 for a good recovery kit. Nice. Cool. And do you like to build your own, or do you like to buy a high quality pre-made? I buy my own because nobody sells this tree strap and a good, good shackles and all this stuff in one place. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. There's one company that does, but they're pretty spendy. Safe Extract. Okay. If you want a one-stop shop, I think the only thing that you're not going to find is a screw pin bow shackle in their kit. Yeah. But I'm kind of a find the gear that you're going to use. Find a good version of it and buy that. Cool. Sweet. And you can build this. It doesn't have to be all in one day. This sounds like a good Christmas episode. Yes, it could be a good Christmas
It would be,
episode.
yeah. Maybe we'll do this at another time.
Go steal the kit out of your partner's vehicle and find out what they do and don't have, and fill in the gaps and replace the junk that's in there.
Exactly.
So absolutely, I think so.
Sweet.
So let's talk real quick about, we were talking about K-ropes, so let's kind of backfill a little bit here. So Kinetic ropes are rated for each vehicle. Okay, you don't just go buy a Kinetic rope and it's appropriate for all recoveries. The rope should be rated for your vehicle weights.
Okay.
Okay. There's been a little bit of a misnomer out there that the bigger the better, and that's not the case. So usually what you're looking for is what the maximum tensile strength or the maximum braking strength is.
Okay.
And you want that to be somewhere between 3 and 5 times the weight of your vehicle.
Okay.
The reason it's your vehicle is you're the one who's providing the momentum to stretch this. Okay. If it's too light or too heavy, either if it's too light, your vehicle will stretch it too much, too fast.
Okay.
Okay. If it's too heavy, it won't stretch it at all. And then this just turns into a static line.
Gotcha.
Okay? You may be able to pull out a much bigger vehicle using a rope that's rated for your vehicle, as long as you can provide enough momentum and force to get there.
Yeah.
But make sure that you're getting that. You can get these in a variety of lengths. I prefer 30 feet because I'm trying to get to traction. So I might need to be a little bit further away, right? You can attach other things to these as long as you've got this in the system. This is still going to provide that kinetic piece to it. You can get them in 20-foot lengths. I have a 20-foot, so it really depends on the scenario. But a good rated one, 30 feet long, serve you really well.
Is there a fear with these that if, for example, that recovery point on my Land Rover were to shear off, you've got is there more tension under these than a static rope that could cause flinging of metal parts on your face?
I mean, it's a big rubber band, so it's storing energy.
Yeah.
So you're actually storing up to 30% of that length, and it turns into a giant slingshot.
Okay.
So you're talking about a big piece of metal going at 357 Magnum speeds.
Yeah.
Through the air.
Right.
And through your windshield, through your body.
Bad news.
Bad news.
Yeah.
So once again, that's why you start slow, right? And only build up so much. And if it's not working with that minimal effort, change your plan.
Cool. Cool. Right on.
Sorry, I guess we're emphasizing that a little bit because it's really important.
No, I think that's really interesting. Yeah.
All right.
100%.
Cool. Well, we don't need all this stuff, so let's kind of select out what we do need.
Yep.
So we're going to need to attach to the back of your vehicle.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to use a pulley block.
Okay.
To come back to mine. On my vehicle, I happen to know that I'm going to need a screw pin bow shackle to come back to mine because the recovery points on mine aren't suitable for that.
Okay.
And let's start with that.
Yeah. Let's do it.
Cool. All right.
Yeah. So, Eric, when you're talking like the winch capacity, 10,000 pounds, is that from the line? Is that based on the motor? Is that based on the gearbox? Do you know how they rate those?
So let's back up a little bit. Not to go too deep into winches, but typically when you buy a winch, you want it rated for at least 1.5 times the gross vehicle weight rating of your vehicle. Okay. That said, winches that say they're 10,000 pound capacity, that's under ideal circumstances. That's on the bench, all the battery power you want, on the bottom layer of the drum. Okay. We've gone out and we've fail tested winches until they bottom out. Usually not at their maximum rated capacity.
Interesting.
Usually 10 to 20% less, even on the bottom drum.
Okay.
So if you can, it's not a bad idea to kind of ramp it up a little bit. Depends on what you're using it for.
Right.
Okay, and how often you're going to be using it. So when you're talking about the power of the winch, the maximum power is on the bottom layer of the drum, and we're going to pull this off here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. And we're talking about how much mechanical advantage we are or aren't applying.
All right.
Okay.
Right on. Sweet.
So before we do that, we need to talk about where we're going to put my vehicle.
Yeah. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So do I want to be at this funky angle?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to want to get it lined up, and we're going to want to find a stable place for us to be. So. Here for you guys, I'm being nice and turning off the motor because we're talking.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Whenever I'm on a recover, that motor stays running.
Okay.
Okay. A running motor is a running motor.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't need it to be failing in the middle of this. But number two, winches draw a significant amount of amperage. Okay. If you run a winch for 5 minutes straight, even less than that, depending on how much load you're pulling, battery's dead.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm leaving my motor running the whole time I'm doing this, so it's continually charging that battery. And even, you know, after we're done winching, that motor stays running to re-top off that battery.
Gotcha.
Okay, so normally this would be running this whole time, but we want you to be able to hear me, so.
Yeah, right on.
Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and chalk some wheels.
Okay.
Get that set up. We're gonna pull the line so we can kind of get a sense of how much length we have to work with, and then we're gonna pull an extension and we'll kind of rig all this up.
Sweet, let's do it.
All right. All right, getting down to the bottom. And this is where I need to actually get down here and see how many wraps I have left on the drum.
Cool.
Okay, so I'm about halfway there. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And once I'm done pulling this out, I'm gonna immediately put it back in gear and to make sure that it's set.
Cool.
Okay, so when you look at how a winch line is attached to a drum, friction is what is holding it on there. Okay, you're gonna, on one end, there's gonna be a little bolt or a screw that's holding it onto the side of the drum. That is not designed to hold any load.
Okay.
Okay, what's holding the load is the friction of the wraps on the drum.
Right.
That's why when you have a synthetic rope, you want about 10 wraps on there.
Cool.
Wire rope, you can have fewer because it's a much higher friction rope.
Gotcha.
You can get down to like 5 or 7.
Cool.
Okay. Other things I'm looking at, you may notice this little abrasion guard on here.
Yep.
This is basically a heat dissipator.
Okay.
So this is designed to keep the rope that's in here from getting as hot because it's on the bottom layer of the drum.
Interesting.
It's also the right length so I can tell when I'm on that bottom layer.
Cool.
Okay. The only thing I don't like about these is it makes it a little bit harder to dress it properly on the drum, but that's okay.
Yeah.
A little bit of safety here. Okay. So we're gonna have lines strung out here. Don't cross them unless you have to.
Okay.
If it is laying on the ground, step on it.
Okay.
Anybody here from climbing land? Don't step on ropes, right? Because they're lifelines. I mean, we're winching vehicles. There could be a body in it, but they're not lifelines in the same way.
Yeah.
When they're on the ground, step on them. If they're in the air, if you can go around, do so. If not, I'll show you a safe way to cross them.
Cool.
But you don't want to straddle and you don't want to step over.
Okay.
Okay. The reason being is that this system can move unexpectedly. And I don't want that line to come up between my legs and hit me in several places I don't want it to.
Right.
The most dangerous being the femoral artery that's really just below the skin right here.
Gotcha.
Okay, that can snap up there, hit you in the femoral artery.
You're gone.
You're gone.
Yeah.
Okay. So while we have gear out here, if it's on the ground, step on it. And when we talk about synthetic line, we have a safety zone.
Okay.
Okay. Safety zone is 1.5 to 2 vehicles on each side.
Cool.
And behind or in front of the vehicles that are in the system.
Cool.
Okay. Important note, if you're using wire rope, that is very different.
Yeah.
Wire rope stretches a little bit more, sometimes a lot more. This stuff is usually 2.5 to 5% stretch.
Okay.
When it's new, a little bit more. After it's been used, less, right? Wire rope, same thing. When it's brand new, it can stretch up to 50% of its length.
Wow.
And when it does that, it's coiled, right? It's actually strands wrapped around a core. And as it stretches, that unwinds and stores torsional energy. That's why when a wire rope breaks, it's so dynamic and so dangerous.
Gotcha.
And it also turns into a giant whip, because usually where it breaks, those strands turn into a blender.
Oh, interesting.
Okay, and it can go any direction up to that 1.5 length from either end of the rope. Okay, so for synthetic, a little bit more reasonable safety margin. For wire rope, from the terminus of each end, you're going 1.5 times the length of whatever you're deploying, and that's where you don't want anybody to be.
Wow, it's big.
So very big area,
Big radius, yeah.
Very important. Okay, cool.
Cool.
So we know that we're going to go down to your vehicle, and we're going to run this line to it, so we can get this ready to go.
Sweet.
So we talked about whether it's appropriate to use a hard shackle versus a soft shackle. You can look at this one over here. It's a really good example. See this really hard edge on here? Not good for soft shackle, right? It might survive, but it'll probably crush it and ruin it.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, it breaks it.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So that's where you might want to have something like this instead.
Cool.
Okay. If you're looking for recovery points on a vehicle, a couple of important factors. You want to make sure that they are frame mounted. Okay. If they're mounted to a bumper, make sure it's not just like welded onto the front.
Right.
There are a lot of like pretty hang my D-rings off of it, shackle holders, but you want to make sure that it is either welded through the bumper or through the bumper and bolted to the frame somehow.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah, right on.
So make sure you're looking at that. If I had one right here, I'd be looking back here and be like, well, how's that attached on the inside?
Gotcha. Yeah.
When I'm looking at frame mounted ones, I want to make sure, ideally, they've got a couple of bolts going into the frame so that we're fighting the shear force of those bolts.
Right.
Okay. The other thing I'm going to do with the way I'm setting this up is I'm putting the bow through so that it can move freely.
Okay, good to know.
If I had the pin on there, the pin is going to want to wedge and it'll try to separate the ears.
Okay.
So orientation might be important also.
Good to know, yeah.
Okay.
And I also noticed you got wheel chocks going.
Yep, wheel chocks are going to increase a little resistance on my vehicle.
Yep.
And we'll talk about vehicle condition when we actually start loading stuff up here.
Sweet.
All right. Probably about 12 feet.
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to go grab something that we can use for 12 feet of extension. Oh, quick note on soft shackles.
Yeah.
How to properly rig them. You can see I have this rigged right here.
Yep.
Okay. Let's demonstrate up here. Hey, make sure that the noose is set properly. Best way to rig these is like so. Okay. The nomenclature for this is knot, noose, load.
Okay.
Okay. Most secure, most reliable, well-rated position for this. Okay. So next step is we're going to put tension in the system.
Okay.
So I'm going to go up there, I'm going to fire up my rig. We're going to winch in just a little bit to put tension in this. And then we want to walk back through and make sure that nothing has changed.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, sounds good. Yeah,
All
let's do it.
We're tensioning. Also notice that I am not up in the fair lead. I'm back here, okay? Winches have run on. Means when I release this switch, they still go in a little bit.
Right.
Or worst case, something happens and this keeps going even though I turn the switch off.
Right.
I don't want my hand up there where it's gonna get sucked into the winch.
Gotcha.
Okay? So what I'm looking for is a little bit of motion in the vehicle. Just like that. And then, while we're looking at the rigging, this gets unplugged.
Cool.
That way there's no mistakes.
Cool.
All right, so now what I'm looking at is I'm gonna go from stem to stern here. I'm gonna check and make sure that this is still properly on here. By the way, real quick, on screw pin bow shackles, used to be that you put it on, turn it off, just twist it back off a quarter or a half turn so it's easy to take off.
Yep.
We don't do that anymore. The shackles are rated for what they're rated for with it seated on the shoulder fully.
Okay.
Okay? Carry some tools to get it off if you need to.
Cool.
Okay? All right, so that looks good. We're gonna walk down the line. We can see that we've got some shrubberies in the way here. You can still step on that.
Cool.
Something I'm definitely looking for is whether or not I'm gonna be dragging this into the ground.
Yep.
Because we're going over horizon a little bit. If I'm concerned about that, a really great mitigation is a traction board.
Oh, cool.
Max tracks and action tracks. You lay them down like this and they sit right in that groove.
Nice.
And protects it from the ground and
Nice.
it seats itself in the ground. So
Really
it's pretty
cool, yeah.
handy. Yeah.
It's a great tip.
So here's a good example of stuff we're looking for. We've got a tree branch getting pulled into the pulley block. Right?
Yeah, bad news.
Not cool, right? So let's get that out of the way. Sorry, Mr. Tree Branch, you're gonna have to get out of the way. I'm also looking to make sure, see we got this stuff in here. We've already picked up some goobers. That's not concerning me too much, but you can see how that could end up being a fail of some kind.
Yeah, bad.
And we're making sure that the line is aligned in the sheave properly. Sometimes they'll hop up a little bit and get just outside of it in between the cheek and the sheave.
Okay.
And that'll end up in a failure.
Okay.
Making sure our soft shackles are still aligned properly. And it all looks good.
Sweet.
So, we're ready to move your vehicle.
Nice.
Okay, so now we have to come up with a communication plan.
Okay, what do we do?
Okay, so a few different ways to communicate. A, we can try to talk on a radio.
Yep.
I don't like to do that. I'm already in my vehicle trying to hold the steering wheel, using my foot on the brake. I'm using a winch controller.
Yep.
Last thing I need to do is be trying to thumb a radio.
Okay.
Okay. Next, we could have somebody out here managing this for us.
Okay.
Somebody that could be in a position where they can see me and see you, but be in a safe space.
Yep.
And they can either give hand signals or verbal signals.
Okay.
I prefer hand signals. Verbal signals get lost in the sound of the motors.
Yeah.
You're in your vehicle. The winch is running. Nobody can hear. So really simple hand signals are winching in,
Yep.
winching out,
Okay.
bumping in,
Okay.
bumping out,
Okay.
stop.
Cool.
That's all you got to know.
Yeah.
Okay. You can even get crazy and run 2 winches at a time if you want. Okay. All right. But those are really good simple hand signals.
Right.
Now, if we're not going to use the radio, we don't have a third person. It's just you and me out here.
Yeah.
We could use the horn method.
Okay.
Same method I use for kinetic recoveries, which is that you get in here, and when you're ready, meep. When I'm ready, meep. Or the other way around. You guys decide.
Okay.
And then once you've both agreed, I start pulling.
Cool.
Okay. We stop when somebody goes beep again.
Okay.
Okay, better yet, beep, 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 so it's really clear.
Cool.
I've had circumstances where somebody's hand slips off the steering wheel and honks the horn. So maybe beep, beep, beep.
Yep.
If you honk the horn, everybody stops.
Yep.
And that's either because I'm recovered, or maybe I'm pulling and I see something wrong.
Okay.
I see, oh, we're digging into the ground.
Right.
Or something's coming loose. Or we are pulling you this way and we're going to end up creating a lot of stress on a component I don't like.
So when I'm in this car being winched out,
Yeah.
what do you like to see?
Fantastic next step.
Okay.
So we'll talk about you and then we'll talk about me too. Okay. So when you're in here, there's either sort of neutral status or vehicle assist.
All right.
Neutral status is you want to be in the vehicle with it running, hands on the steering wheel, emergency brake off, and in neutral.
Okay.
Okay. Neutral means that your wheels are just going to turn as I pull you.
Yep.
Okay. The benefit to that is that, especially like if we're in mud right here,
Right.
if you drive, you might spin your wheels and cause a loss of traction. And what we're really trying to do is roll you right back up the way you came.
Okay.
If you're spinning your wheels, suddenly you've reduced the friction.
Right.
You've created into a slick surface, and now we're going back and forth like this.
Right.
Which is not getting us a nice smooth pull back out. And we might be introducing shock load as your vehicle goes back and forth.
Cool.
Okay, we don't like that. The other is vehicle assist, which is you would have it in reverse, and you would just let it idle and maybe a little bit of throttle so that you can help the vehicle climb out.
Okay.
The tricky part about vehicle assist is you do not want to outrun the winch line.
Right.
Okay. If you outrun it, what ends up happening is that there's slack. And then when it catches up, there's a shock load
Right.
as the winch catches up again. Okay. That puts stress on your components, may break my winch, may put stress on all the connectors we have.
Cool.
Okay. So if you're doing vehicle assist, it's usually just in neutral, maybe a little bit of gas. But then as soon as you start moving on your own, we're either going to stop because you can drive.
Right.
Or you're going to let off so I can continue to pull you.
Cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's where radio might come in handy because, toot will stop and I get on the radio and be like, hey, can you drive?
So in this instance, what do you think would be better?
I think we'll just give it a nice long pull, and that way you guys can see how the system works.
Yeah, that sounds good.
You can watch how the vehicle comes up out of the mud. You can see how the pulley block's working, how the line loads up a little bit.
Sweet.
And we'll see if you move me instead of me moving you.
All right.
All right, so we talked about you. So in my vehicle, I'm gonna do something similar but different. So I've got wheels chalked, that's great. I'm gonna have the motor running, I'm gonna have foot on the brake, and I'm gonna have the emergency brake on, but I'm also gonna be in neutral, okay? I don't want any load on my transmission, in particular the parking pawl in the transmission.
Right.
No load on that, so similar, only different, and hopefully I'll stay there. All right, so this guy stays out of the way. For me, it's easiest to loop it up through the wiper blade.
Right.
And then I'm wrapping it around the mirror, and it's gonna go right here.
Yeah, because they give quite a bit of excess.
Yeah, and not every mirror is gonna do this for you, but what you wanna avoid is this thing dangling inside the vehicle.
Sure.
Because that just turns into a circumstance where I close my door on it, I bump it with my knee, and I'm activating it when I don't want to.
Right.
Cool?
All right. Yeah, so back into neutral. You can feel the front end of the Land Cruiser dive down a little bit as we get under tension there. and he's starting to come up.
Cable is taking up some slack. Yep. Vehicle is being elegantly pulled backwards now, like it's nothing. And that winch doesn't even sound like it's working. It now sounds like it's working a little bit. But that's it. This Land Rover is gonna be freed any minute now. How cool is that?
I want to show you guys something. All right, so we're doing a fairly long pull, right?
Yep.
So we've got you about halfway.
Okay.
What I'm going to want to do periodically is I want to make sure that we're not what's called side loading the winch.
Okay.
Okay, so ideally when we're spooling in, that winch line is following the other threads that are on there, right?
Right.
And it's spooling properly. But what happens often, especially if you've got a little bit of offset,
Yeah.
it'll all stack on one side of the drum. Okay, so let's get in here and look at this real quick.
So that's part of the reason that you want the front end of your vehicle pointed exactly toward where
Yeah.
you're winching to.
So it looks really good. You can see how it's actually lined up pretty well. It's not stacked up on one side. What we might start to see, because we've got this angle here, is that now that it's over here, as we continue to pull, it'll continue to stack on that side of the drum. Okay? That's fine for 3 or 4 wraps.
Right.
But then we start getting into the tie rods that hold the winch together. And if you go too high, you'll literally break the winch in half.
Holy cow.
Okay, so you got to be paying attention to that. And that may just mean, okay, I need you to secure your vehicle. We're going to take the tension off. I'm going to rewind the line so it's back on the other side and we can start again.
Gotcha.
Okay.
And I guess another advantage of having as much line out as we do is that there's not as many wraps.
So if I don't have 4 or 5 wraps on it already, I have a lot more to work with.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can see we're just starting to go onto the second layer on the drum,
Right.
which means my winch power just went down a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So we might feel that. We were talking about that in the truck.
Yeah.
So what we're talking about, when the line's coming out from the drum, we want it to be at 90 degrees. That's where the fulcrum is for the winch. What we call fleet angle is when it goes off a little bit. If you're within about 5 degrees, you're not really going to lose much winch power. But if you're pulling at a really severe angle, you start losing winch power just at the drum.
Okay.
So if you're doing a really wonky pull off to the side, and we're off on the side of this roller here, it's putting a lot of stress on this little pivot point right here, but you're also reducing the power of the winch because you're at a weird angle.
Gotcha.
Okay, so that's why I want it as straight on as we can. Cool?
Cool.
All right, so do we want to keep pulling you up?
Eric, my man, that was incredible.
Fantastic.
Dude, that is so...
And your rig, it's back.
It's back! You saved the day! Look, I think the important thing is there's so much to learn and we just barely glazed the surface.
Yeah.
So if folks want to learn more, how do they get a hold of you and how do they take some lessons?
Yeah, so you can find my Facebook page or my website, Sierra Mechanica, not with an L on the end, just Sierra Mechanica. You can contact these guys. They know how to get a hold of me. You can look on the side of my truck. I've got a phone number. Yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions. I've got classes on the calendar already. So happy to have you guys come out and check out this cool stuff.
No, dude, it was awesome. I learned so much in such a short amount of time, and there's so much more to do, so I really appreciate this.
Excellent. Thanks for having me out. This has been fun.
Thanks, and guys, head over to alltfl.com, and we got more coming with Eric down the line, potentially, so be sure to stay tuned.
Thanks, folks.